you are sharing your screen.
Yeah.
And
I
then
just started it. You want me to?
and Sam, you did record it to the cloud.
Correct.
Okay.
In Monday.
Careful.
Good to see everybody. If everybody could mute when they come in.
Sorry, I muted everyone and then muted you, Michael.
Here we go. Cool. How's everybody doing? We got another couple minutes. We'll let everybody get in here. And then we'll get ready to rock and roll. Welcome, everybody. It's 8 o'clock. We're going to give everybody another couple minutes so we can crowd everybody into this space. You guys remember back in the day when we'd have them piling into, they'd be piling into the side aisles in the middle and then out into the hallway. Now it's kind of piling into the virtual space, which is cool. Give everybody another couple minutes. Let me make sure I got you guys on. If you guys could unmute and just say what's up, just make sure I got you. I didn't lose you on here.
Hey, hey.
I'm here.
I'm here.
Me too.
All right, cool. All right, we're still climbing participants, so we'll give it another minute or so.
Sounds great.
All right, beautiful. All right, well, I got 8:02. Shall we, even though we're climbing, shall we get this party started? What do you guys think?
Definitely.
Definitely. All
Yeah.
right.
Rock and roll.
All right. So what's up, fellas? What's up, NAEA? We've got a full house tonight and a rock star lineup for everybody. We've got the Journal Fodder Junkies. We got the Tetrad crew and yours truly. We'll be dropping the presentation into the NAEA files when we're done. So stick around. And we're also going to take your questions in the chat as we go. So please do us a favor. Turn your cameras on because we present better when we can see you. That's just how we roll. And mute. We got your mics muted, but get the chat room rocking. Okay. And to kick us off, I'd like to first introduce myself, followed by my four pals that I've been collaborating with for, geez, it's been like over a decade now. So I'm Michael Bell. I'm an artist. I'm a TED speaker, author, visual journaling pioneer, the founder of the 31 Nights Project, and current supervisor of visual and performing arts for Queen Anne's County Public Schools in Maryland. Now on to my artistic accomplices in the orders that they will appear tonight. Let's start with Dave. Give us a quick snapshot of who you are, what it is you do, and if you want a quick blurb about your connection to collaboration art and how it's rooted in the visual journaling process.
Sure. So good evening, everybody. It's great to see a lot of people here. My name is David Modler. I work at Shepherd University in West Virginia. It's in the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia. I coordinate the art education program and foundations there, along with teaching printmaking and drawing and visual journals. And so I've been working in visual journals for a little over 20 years, along with my friend Eric Scott, who's in this group as well. We've written a couple books on the topic. And then with my friend Sam Peck, we've written a couple articles that are coming out soon about some of our further explorations with visual journals. And then otherwise, I'm also a painter and do a lot of large-scale installation work with that.
Eric, let's take the floor away.
So I'm Eric Scott. I am an artist and an educator in Northern Virginia, just right outside of Washington, D.C. I was a public school art teacher for 20 years, and then I ran away. And now I manage and run a local art center, and I travel and teach. So I'm still a teacher, still an educator, but just kind of like Dave said, I started collaborating with him 20 years ago, more than that now, with the visual journal, and just been doing that ever since, and just excited to be sharing with you all tonight.
All right,
my name's-
Sam Peck.
Hi, my name's Sam Peck. Currently in Minneapolis, Minnesota, working on my PhD, where I'm a student here in the Twin Cities at the University of Minnesota. I have a BFA and MFA in printmaking and studio practice. I was a PK through 12, or I should say PK through 16, both formally and informally educator for about 15 years prior to my PhD. And I will be talking about my research interest with the visual journal as a tool for critical inquiry and reflection, and how that's kind of moved into collaborative processes. Like Dave said, I am involved in the Tetrad project, and I do a lot of work with these other gentlemen as well. I feel like they're all my collaborators. I don't know if I would put them in any one slot, but I feel like we all work across spaces together.
And I
I
don't
had
think you
the
worked in
privilege-
the word phenomenology. I don't think you worked that in.
I won't do that this time, but
All right,
he's,
well,
he's trying to poke my my research beast.
I love you, brother. All
Me
right,
too.
Sam. Michael Dodson.
I was muted, sorry. Michael Dodson. I'm an artist and teacher. I'm in my 27th year teaching at French Prairie Middle School in Woodburn, Oregon. I've been using, I used sketchbooks for many years, but I have been using visual journals, which I won't get into now, but it's a completely different and wonderful beast. I've been using those for over 10 years.
All right, well, welcome, fellas. We're gonna get everybody buckle up. Let's get the chat room rocking, and we're gonna get this party started. So let's get into it. For me, the art making process was always rooted in visual journaling, and this interesting marriage for me of images and words, my attraction to the power of the prompt, and for kids I'd work with, it was all about creating challenges around big ideas. If you can think of Guy's Grocery Games, Chopped, but in art, this is how collaboration art began. And it began for me with these worlds of prompts, writing, art, intertwining themselves really just throughout my life and my career. First, it happened with a dear friend of mine, Michael Sprouse, who I first met when he owned a gallery in DC back in the early 2000s. And these images are from a first collaboration art piece that really happened by accident. We were hanging out in his studio when we decided to paint. He chose a vintage photograph of somebody long dead that he had felt a connection to for whatever reason, that he found this photograph of. And I chose somebody who was living, who I felt a connection to. And from there, we invented a narrative around what the connection might be between them and why we were drawn to choose them. So we began painting together at the same time throughout the night. And later we ended up doing 3 two-man collaboration art shows. And it was when I realized also how much kids could really benefit learning from each other, painting by committee and small groups using a big idea. So from this scenario, what I would do is I would set up stations with random objects and ask kids to piece together a scene. avoiding the word still life at all costs. And they'd begin taking turns, passing a single drawing around, adding to it, subtracting from it, building it up in what I would call layers of meaning around an arrangement that they created. They set up the Academy Award winning lighting for, and they created a storyline around. So this kind of collaborative play led me to prompts like my 31 Nights project. And here in this slide, 30 Works project, which essentially is 30 works in 60 minutes, speed drawings. And you would take a selected object and set number of pieces of paper, random materials, and everything must add up to 30 works in the end. No matter if you rip, tear, spend 2 minutes on one drawing, 20 minutes on another, this is how that process would take shape. It expanded into a worldwide collaboration with Eric Fischel for his America Now and Here project back in 2012 that we first unveiled at NAEA. And these 30 works were each based on our 30 human rights. So each student chose a human right they were passionate about, and the entire body of work made up the collective of the exhibition. And lastly, for me, some of my portrait commissions that I do for actors in Hollywood led to me writing my first screenplay, which also was based on a series of cinematic paintings, which each painting could stand on its own to tell its own narrative. But when placed in a specific viewing order, it would tell an entirely different tale. So it's much like you would see in an AP sustained investigation. So I'm a firm believer in staying an artist and allowing your kids to see you working. This became a process for those students. And as you can see, this girl in particular got into visual journaling so in deep that it became her process, but also her product. And that collaboration between the visual and verbal language surrounding an essential question for a theme, it led to her entire, at the time, the AP concentration, what it used to be called. It folded up like a big visual journal in the end. And as you can see, there's her mini visual journal as its companion piece where process actually becomes product. So that's a little about what I do with collaboration art beyond murals, beyond exquisite corpse and things of that nature, and how collaboration arts really become both a process and a product for me, but very rooted in the visual journal.
So Michael, somebody in the chat said something about that collaboration with Eric Fischel, how incredible that was. Does Eric also work with journals?
So Michael Sprouse, that one, the second slide.
With Eric Fischel.
Oh, Eric Fischel. Okay. Yeah, he does. And his work is very rooted in, so his early processes in the 80s was very interesting. He worked on these big sheets of glassine. Now we have Photoshop, but he would scratch and draw over these sheets of glassine, and he would rearrange the different sheets of glassine to eventually arrive at his composition. So I always looked at Eric Fischel as a model for a very non-traditional visual journal through those glassine drawings. You should check out his glassine works.
Oh, great.
And I'll turn it over to you, my friend.
All right, well, thank you. So so David Modler here again. What I was going to talk about was a little bit with the visual journal and how it's led to other collaborations between myself, collaborations with the public schools in the district where my university is situated, and then how it's created other kinds of connections within that community. So one of the projects that my friend Sam and I have been working on, Sam Peck, who's going to speak in a little bit, is a journal exchange project. And I started using that journal exchange project with my students at the university. They keep a visual journal as part of their teacher ed preparation. So they don't get a notebook. In some of the classes, we don't even have a textbook. We just use current literature that's coming out in journals. And they use their visual journal as a place to document things that are occurring in the class and outside of class. It's a place where they're able to record any sorts of observations that they have when they're out in the classrooms looking at other teachers. It becomes a very strong reflective tool for them as a teacher and as a student. And then it also becomes very powerful for them when they're just experimenting with materials and learning new techniques. So it led to collaborating with journals with a former student who was teaching at an elementary school near the university. And she wanted me to come in as an artist in residence and work with her students. So we were able to do it during a spring semester when I would have a spring break. During that semester, I had a curriculum and instruction course. So like all the kinds of things that I do, I find ways to bring my students into my practice. So I'm a working artist in my studio, but any opportunity I have to get my students involved and model that for them, that the students that they teach are just as viable influences and collaborators as anyone else can be. And as a teacher, there's sort of a unique group of people that you can tap for those kinds of resources. So started working on this project, working with this line work, which comes from the inside, started from the inside of a security envelope. So curiously enough, I was just opening mail and found this pattern. It's a moire pattern. The whole idea with the security envelope, of course, is you could hold it up to the light and not be able to see through it. But my question became, as an artist, thinking about that and the inquiry that I was looking at in my work was, to what degree is that really secure? And if because if somebody really wanted to see what was inside that envelope, as it were, they would just break it open and they would just look at it. So it's an illusion of security. And it led in my work to thinking about other illusions of security that we have in our lives. So the line work that started out from those envelopes started extending into larger paintings, and then it extended into this collaboration with the students in elementary school, which my students went in and worked with me. We worked on panels. These are all repurposed cardboard panels from the cafeteria, and students were able to investigate the color scheme that was chosen by the class. The focus of this exhibit became this idea of homeland security, and that was actually developed by one of the fifth graders in the class. He and I were working on the wall and doing some painting, and he was asking me about this pattern, and I was just telling him that the pattern, I was telling him about the whole security envelope thing. There's the pattern working on the wall. Tell him about the security envelope pattern, and it just made him, with the red, white, and blue and the patriotic colors, which was part of the grant theme, he was the one that sort of came up with the idea. So we're sort of painting homeland security. And this was also about 5 years ago. So it was maybe a little bit more of a prevalent term that we were really thinking about at that moment in history. So these are just some of the kids working on those panels. Those all came apart. And like a lot of the work that I do, I build things in ways that they're sort of modules, so that things can be taken apart and then rebuilt. And depending on the context of the space that it's rebuilt in, it a lot of times turns into something different. So when I'm collaborating, I work a lot with these guys that are in this talk with me on various projects. But at the university, my students become the key collaborators with me, and then I try to model that for them and push that out into the schools. And for example, with this one, it was a former student that invited us in to have more collaborative investment in the community, and just to show my students that they need to sort of think outside the classroom. And we were able to bring that show, the previous slide that showed the exhibition, we were actually able to bring the exhibition, and that's installed in the gallery at my university. So the students and the teacher and families came and helped install, and each strand that's hanging there represents one class in the school. So there was 27 strands that hung from the ceiling. So the ceiling's about 30 feet high. So it was a very immersive and kind of installation that you could walk through. And, it's really cool to see the kids walk through, pushing the things around, and it has a lot of flow and movement in it when you're in that space.
So I was wondering, Dave, if what advice, like you've met up with a former student, what advice would you give for teachers like trying to do this kind of collaboration, like reaching out or like making these connections?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say if there's a university or an art program at a university that's in your community that's accessible, if you haven't heard from the art education department at that school, maybe reach out to them and see if they're interested in bringing their students over to do some sort of community-based project with you. Another idea would be just sort of, I think Michael Bell does a really good job of this, just kind of keeping track of your former students. Like, where are they? What are they up to? What are they doing? And you can find ways to bring all that together and find those collaborators that are around. I've also had parents that have been in my schools that were interested in working with me and working with the students. They were artists as well. So a lot of times grants and such that I've written have been working with parents that I see at the school. So I'm gonna hand it over to Eric, or actually, who's this? No, it's gonna go over to Sam, right?
No, Eric, you're right. Eric.
Oh no, this
looks like
collaborative
Sam.
art, that's Sam's.
That's
Oh,
Sam.
Sam. Okay.
Yeah.
Sam. Okay.
Hey, everybody. This is collaborative art as research. Next slide, please. Oh, am I advancing here? Oh, I am. Cool. All right. So I first want to talk about something that came out of the visual journal and then kind of expanded into another form. This is a piece of artographic inquiry that I did that was me collaborating with my dog. I was making art in my studio for a while, and then I was going on walks with my dog after listening to theory on audio tape, and I was talking to my dog a lot out loud, and that might seem like a wacky thing to do, but it ended up helping me think about what was going on in the theory that I was thinking about and how I can apply that to my research. So I started making art about this processing. As that process, as Michael Bell talked about, as the process became the product. My next thing I wanted to talk about briefly was this project that I work on with Dave, and it's called We Will Draw with Anyone About Anything. It's a homage to Steve Lambert. He once sat at a picnic table and he talked about things, and he said, I will talk with anyone about anything. And Dave and I kind of picked up this idea with Steve's permission, and we started working on this project of drawing with others as a way to do research, but also a way to inclusively ask others to come in and work with us. And, how do we make art with others as a productive community-based way? And then we took a lot of that work, and you can kind of see it behind me, and you can see it in the image here. And it's, sitting on both walls there. As these works happen, we take one half of it, we'd put it on the wall, and we'd give away the other half to the participant. So you walk away with the thing, and then we also build this kind of community wall, and participants can continue to work into this community built wall. And I think it'd be a great thing to have in the classroom as a possible product that goes ongoing throughout the year. Students work on it and build on it. I know Dave thinks about this as a morning activity or a wake up activity for a lot of his classes, as like an exquisite corpse kind of expanded project. If you don't know about exquisite corpses, I suggest you look them up and Google them. There's a little time to talk through most of that. Okay, there we go. I got to the next slide. So the next piece I want to talk about is a project to do with my fellow researcher. Her name is Amanda Swearnigan. This is a comic-based piece of work that the two of us did, thinking about how we can revisit curriculum. So that if you open this up, the slides up that we've shared, you'll see that on the right side, it's kind of a dystopian look at education. And then as we go through the comic, we go to a utopian side. And we really rethought, what are some of the problems that we see happening in education, and what are some of the ways that, the arts and art education can open up a space to have greater narratives and greater understanding of translingualism and a multiliteracy approach or multimodal approach to how education can exist. And throughout this kind of curriculum as a character throughout the entire comic changes the way we know and understand curriculum. But this is a collaboration that, I wanted to show you all because it talks about the ways that multiple disciplines can come and work together. Amanda wanting to do something that had to do with the arts, and me wanting to kind of speak to literacies and language itself. Amanda being a multi-language educator and researcher herself. So in this work, which is called The Liminal Becomes the Real, which is going to be published in the near future, the two of us kind of work together on this speculative realist comic about how to think through that space of what is education. And so I wanted to present this here because it began inside my visual journal. And as she and I were talking, we kind of thought through the space and moved forward. I can't move to the next slide. It is the next, there we go. And I want to move on to my next collaborator here. This is my good friend, Eric Scott. And before I go on, Eric, are there any questions that were popping in the chat that you want me to grab hold of or think through or anything?
Didn't really see any questions, but I'm trying to like come up with one just to let you talk a little bit more. So like what is your attraction to the collaboration? You know, that idea of just like drawing with anybody or working with this fellow researcher. What do you get out of it, or what's your attraction to it?
Well, one, I really think it's a great way of thinking with somebody else. You know, I think a lot of us do this, you know, and I think Dave and I, and, you know, I'm not sure who exactly coined the term. It might be Sunny Brown in her talk. The idea of copying is often talked about, or working with somebody else. It might be on the Ken Robinson talk. You know, we're often siloed and said, think by ourselves. And I'd like the idea that we give students and each other the room to think with another, whether that's with your dog, you know, your fellow researcher, your friends in the Tetrad project, inside a visual journal. But however that happening, you know, the thinking with really produces new thoughts and a new space. And I think that can be done in artistic practice, in, you know, in research, in how students think through problems together, or make problems, as your previous talk spoke to, in the choice-based approaches that you guys went into. And I think that's really where a lot of the dynamic happens here. That's very exciting for me with doing research as a collaborative process, or collaboration as as a piece that's researched itself.
Hey, and Sam, I was going to say that think about later on when we get done, bring up some ideas about how some of this collaboration is building into your dissertation. Okay. Maybe you can bring some of that up. Bring some of that up when we're
talk about feminology.
Yeah.
Actually, Sam, that what you just said kind of leads directly into what I wanted to talk about. So it was a perfect segue. So I'm glad I asked that question.
Unplanned amazingness.
And but I think what you're referring to is Ken Robinson talking about how, like, kids, if you're taking a test and you're collaborating with your neighbor, that's cheating. But in the real world, we call that collaboration. And it's like, you know, if you don't know an answer, it's like you turn and you ask somebody. So it's like in the real world, that's collaboration. In school, we call that cheating. So I don't know if that's what you were talking about, but yeah, that was Ken Robinson. So Michael, if you want to go ahead and advance the slide. So I'm kind of, this was a collaboration that I did with a good friend of mine who was a middle school art teacher at the time, in visual journals. And I was really kind of thinking about this as not so much the collaboration, like these other guys have been like giving very specific examples of collaboration. I was thinking about it as sort of like maybe that reason, like, why do we collaborate, or what's the benefits? And what I came up with was this idea of it being greater than the sum being greater than the parts. You may have seen like this equation, 1 + 1 = 3. And it's this idea that when two things come together, that they actually create a third thing that is completely different than either of the other things. And when in a true collaboration, I think that's what happens, is that you are collaborating, you're working with this maybe one other person or a whole group of people, but all these ideas are coming in together. And I wanted to show you these images. You can get into the next slide, Mike. These are all from this little collaborative journal. And a lot of times when you do collaborative journals, it's sort of like, you know, you have your pages and the other person has their pages, and you never really mix them together. But with my friend, we really just decided, like, okay, there are no such things as my pages and your pages. It's our pages, and that you're going to work together. And what I found really awesome with this was that our styles really melded together. And what happened was, like, things would happen that I could never do on my own, that she could never do on her own, but then working together created this other thing. And it really just kind of fed me and gave me lots of awesome ideas. And it just was just really this all of a sudden this word journey pops up. And yeah, it was just this very wonderful kind of artistic journey, and taking me to a place, and you know, the ideas, the artwork, the concepts that came up in this collaboration just took me to a place where, like, I wouldn't have done it prior. And so I think that's one of the key benefits of collaboration, is this idea that 1+1=3. That idea that you know, if you have two kids in your classroom collaborating, that they create something where I see in the chat, Dave just mentioned negotiation. And so it is this negotiation of a space, negotiation of imagery, and that this thing comes up that belongs to both of them, but yet has a life of its own. And it's just kind of this really just this really interesting space, that it becomes more than what you would do on your own and what the other person would do on their own. It becomes this new thing. And so just kind of that's why I liked what Sam was saying about that idea of being able to think with somebody, and think in ways that perhaps you couldn't by yourself. So but yeah, that's just kind of like was what I was thinking about whenever we were kind of talking about this idea of collaboration, and that whenever two artists come together, or even multiple artists, a whole bunch of artists, if you all have ownership in it, and like sort of equal say in the collaboration, it does just become this new space, this different space. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to who we have left. Michael Dotson.
Yep. Hey, and Eric, I don't think I've ever heard you say that, talk about that 1+1=3 thing, but I love thinking about how there are two people contributing to this unforeseen thing, this manifestation of it that you can't even really see it reflected in its parts. It becomes a completely new thing. I love that. I love that thinking, because it's like transformative in a way. And I feel like I love listening to the four of you talk, and I love because it's inspiring to me. And it's some of them are these big picture things, but then every once in a while I remember, Michael, you're a middle school teacher. You got to sell this stuff to a 6th grader. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? And so I realized, you know what? I have to actually, what I'm doing is I'm selling these grand, amazing ideas to young minds, many of whom are really skeptical. They don't see themselves as artists. They don't think they're creative. They feel like they're limited to the point that they don't really have anything to offer. And so what I am doing, or what I need to do, is bridge the gap between what they think they are and who they can become. And so in one of these conversations we had last spring, this little term came up, and it was conspirators, co-conspirators. And I know like conspiracy, that's kind of got some negative connotations. You know, you conspire to do something, it's unlawful. You're sort of unseating, or you're doing something disruptive. But when I think about this, when you are a co-conspirator in the pursuit for creative discovery, what you're doing is you're working to shift your understanding of maybe something that you already have these beliefs around. And so when I'm talking to my kids about, taking creative chances and, trying something new, and their first response to me is, I can't do that. I don't know what to do. I'm not sure if I can do this. No, I'm not an artist. I'm terrible at this. I can't do it. No, I can't. Then when we begin to think about it collaboratively, then that's when some of this magical stuff can happen. That's when the 3 begins to emerge. And so I just was kind of thinking about that, and some of the stuff that when I'm thinking of collaborative experiences that I want my students to have, these are some things that I'm keeping in mind. Like, how do we share that purpose so that I don't feel like the weight is all on me? Like, how can I contribute in a way that I feel like I've done something, but I've also played a part in a larger kind of pursuit, part of which I helped to make happen and part of which I'm going to learn from. So how did I share that purpose? How does my confidence grow as a part of, or how can I grow their confidence as they try these things, many of which are new to them and that they feel that they're not good at? How do I level the skills for them when they're able to contribute to these things? They're able to, how can I draw on this so that kids who feel really, really limited, they can still contribute, but kids who have a lot to say and have that confidence, that they can also play, a role that makes them feel meaningful, where they can still grow. How can I begin to sort of build some of these creative habits in them? Because oftentimes they don't know what it feels like. What does it feel like to be an artist who is constantly driven, who always wants to respond to things, who has something to say, who wants to show their thinking visually? Sometimes, like, you have to sort of make that a part of a habit for them, so that they begin to sort of understand, oh, all right, this is how that creative groove happens. Okay, and so those, and among some other things, but so 2 years ago, I was talking to Sam, and we actually, I think, Sam, you came up with this. He came up with this thing called capture play. But it was, and I think the biggest part was, it was making sense of things that randomly happen. And so breaking it down, it's like you experiment with something, you discover something through the experiment, you share that with other people, and then you figure out how you want to apply it in future work. So you're essentially having the artistic experience, but sort of in a contained and sort of supportive environment in the classroom. So in my class, what I would do is I would put in the middle of the table all of these materials. Some of them are traditional art making materials, maybe paintbrushes and paint, maybe some markers or colored pencils, but then also random things like spools and pieces of bubble wrap or tinfoil or cotton balls. And then they would just go at it. And they would discover something and they would create something. And what they're doing is they're kind of putting things together randomly. I don't tell them whether it needs to be 2D or 3D. Anyway, they become the master of some particular creative idea that they did. And then they share it with other people. And we do this all the time, so that what they're looking for is novel, disruptive, kind of that this conspirator's approach to creative ideas, because they begin to find their own personal artistic identity and all that. So that's what I got.
Yeah, and Michael, you're really good at helping a kid not feel inferior to the process, and getting down to their level and allowing them a window and a place in. And I think that everybody on this panel has been really good with rooting things, the process in the visual journal. Like for me, I would always have kids that would leave little things in that visual journal as an entry place for me when I'm looking through it, to discover and have a conversation with them about and around. Share, I'm going to open this up to the whole group to share some other ideas on how you get that collaborative environment going. Even in the pandemic, and even in this hybrid learning space that we've been forced into.
I want to first
think there's.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just looking at the chat, and I think there's a couple questions that really feed into this really well. And a couple of people were asking, like, sort of like, how do you kind of set up or set the stage for collaboration, like setting the parameters? And Dave had mentioned, and I called this out whenever I was speaking, that negotiation. So I think maybe just kind of talking a little bit about that idea of negotiation, about, when you got collaborators coming together, how do you determine what those parameters are? So
yeah, and I was going to say, Eric, you kind of spoke to that really well, because when you're negotiating that space with another, you have to first accept the fact that it's not just all about you, and that this space is going to be cherished and honored by both, or by everyone that's working in that space. And as the artist, that's something that you can model. I think Michael does a great job of that with his middle school kids. And it's something that you can cultivate that space, but it's something that they have, it's another thing that the kids are learning about. Even when I'm working with students at the university and they'll have to do a collaborative project in my class, collaborative presentation or something, they hate it. They hate working with other people. And I'm like, I don't know like why this is so hard. And what it comes down to is for them, they're worried about their grade. They're always worried about their grade. And it's sort of, I don't want to rely on someone else for my grade. And so I have come up with different assessment strategies to eliminate that your grade has anything to do with anyone else in your group. But it's, I think
Well,
it's
Dave,
about
I think I think it comes from, whenever we've all had that experience with group projects where,
right. Oh, I know where
we
it
do
comes
all the
from.
work.
Yeah, I know where it comes from. And, but when they get in the real world, it's not going to work that way. And,
Yeah.
and so they've got to start figuring it out, and or they're going to get a job and not last very long.
Think about the non-applied stuff though, like that collaborative, like the energy in the room is collaboration. It's like building on that. It's like, you got to see what he's got going on here. I mean, I'm serious about this. You got to come see this. And they're like, what? Okay. And then people are moving all over, and it's like all of a sudden these people are like, whoa, he called me out and it felt good. Like, so sometimes the collaboration isn't actually two hands in a work. It's like collaborative energy in the room. And people are like, I can't wait to get back to that room, that class, because I feel like I'm a part of something. Like, even though I'm doing my own work, I'm a part of something, and I'm feeling.
And that's it. You know what? That is the thing that's been missing since the pandemic, is the acknowledgement piece. The kids are missing that acknowledgement piece because they haven't had the shows. They haven't had a place to exhibit their work. They haven't had a place to get it out publicly. They haven't had a safe space where we're providing positive praise in front of peers. And walking into that space where the music's blasting, where everybody's creative and everybody's, going back and forth between each other's work and adding a little something in. But it is like some people have been posting in the chat. It's all about modeling that process. And unless you're willing to do it first, I would never give a kid something I myself wouldn't do first. Unless you're willing to jump in that sea with them, it's never going to work, because you aren't going to understand their mindset, because you won't even understand their pitfalls or what they're even going through, even in a visual journaling space that's their own, unless you're doing it too, unless you're sharing it right along with them.
I just wanted to speak to some of what Eric was talking about, in setting up Michael talks about bringing the energy to the space, and it's comforting and welcoming and making that. But there's also a conversation to be had about honoring the other, which is very pertinent to like what's going on in today's world, about how students treat each other as well as each other's stuff. And spaces. So thinking about the page of the visual journal or the journal itself as something that gets shared, but also honored by the other. You want me to treat you the same way that I'm treated, and that you want to be treated. So like honoring the marks of the others, something I think that Dave and Eric often talk about. In the project that Dave and I do with each other that I spoke to, the Draw with Anyone, Anywhere, we often speak about, when a person comes to work with us, that they become the director, and they, giving that opportunity for the other to direct their own mark making, where the conversation flows, how the work gets built, and then responding to that. And so students kind of recognizing that for each other, where am I being led by my collaborator, and then responding to it, and allowing for a give and take in the same way you would allow for a conversation. If you interrupt somebody, you apologize, and how do you work in that way? And that same level of politeness that you expect in conversation, you do in collaborative art making, and relating that to students, because they already have the expertise to do this. They do it all the time. And hey, I've got an idea. Oh, what about if you do this? What if you do that? Kids do this in their regular play. How do you let them know that they already have this? So you de-skill the idea of collaboration, right? And then bring that knowledge and say, you already have this. bring that knowledge you already contain into the classroom for how you work together for this art making as a team. You know, they often don't realize, oh, I already know how to do that. Allow them to access the knowledge that they already know. Don't make it something that's about expertise and skill and all these people have already done this and they're questioning, can I do that? No, you got this. You already know how to do it. Bring that into the space. And I just wanted to speak to that because rather than it being something that, oh, I'm not sure how to navigate this. I'm not, you know, do my kids know how to go through this? Yeah, they do it all the time.
And Sam, you know, learning is a very social and emotional process. And I've often said it at many talks, what's the purpose of education, whether it's art education or just education in general? And I've often said it as it's the cultivation of the human spirit on a journey of self-discovery. And so how do you cultivate that? Now we have about another minute, and then we have actually 10 more minutes before they totally kick us out. So we're going to keep going for 10 minutes. For those of you that want to stay on in the chat. And David, I think this question was directed at you.
Yeah,
and I
so
hope everyone will
that's
join
fine.
us again on Saturday at 4 p.m. for visual journaling, the multifaceted approaches, because we're going to be back with a round 2 of this with the 5 of us. But David, assessments.
Yeah, I saw
Someone
the
wanted you to
question.
share. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw the question on assessment, and
Yep.
the way that I focus that is I focus on the formative. I focus on the observation. I focus on the conversation and the dialogue with the student. I focus on
The process.
the artistic behaviors, the process, not on the thing that they're making, but on what it is that they're doing. And that's what I'm most interested in when I'm watching those students. It's, you know, at the end of the day, we all want the cool thing to look at. It's like the art world is always going to like the cool thing, but I think the kids need to also understand what it's like to be an artist, how to work like an artist. And the world is if it's not becoming, it needs to become more collaborative. And if that's one class at a time, then that's how I try to make that work. I also do a lot of reflective statements. So they're keeping a journal. There's reflective statements that they're writing that I can read. So there's this anecdotal data from the student, artist statements about their experience and about the work they did, their feelings about having to negotiate space and this place that they worked in at the same time with other students, and just giving them the room to express that. And if they can express that and they can reflect on that, then the project has served its purpose. And if all of that worked, it also rendered a really cool looking outcome.
Yeah, and I've often found if you can find a way to help students navigate the world of creating their own personal criteria for their own self-assessments, that's even better, because then they're actually searching for things that they're trying to do. They're all of a sudden directing where they're going with things.
And if you think
can
of it,
certainly guide that process.
yeah, if you think of the collaboration as an experiential play, it's like kids make their own rules when they play. You
Yeah.
can think of the negotiation, you can think of the collaboration in that way. Rules will get developed by the artist as they go. When working with large groups and installations, I find myself having to step back and force myself to let go and see somebody do something and just realize, like, I gotta just let them do that. I can't step in. I can't control what I thought that should be. It needs to be them. They need to have the agency. They need to do it.
There will be some teachers, though, who still say, I love that. I have standards that I have to teach to, and I have to score them in a certain way. And I understand that can be a challenge for people. But I still feel like even within those kinds of requirements, acknowledging that sort of the engagement that you have, acknowledging their perseverance, their willingness to take chances, and their willingness to live or to work through failures and to sort of redirect their ideas, making sure that, that even if that isn't what the only thing you can assess, making sure that is a part of their understanding of their learning, because like we would, I think, all agree that is perhaps the most valuable part of it anyway. So just making sure that all of us are communicating that to them. You did this thing that was really hard and it didn't work out so well all the time, but it's awesome that you kept trying. Thank you.
Well, and I think that's why it's getting back to like what Dave was saying, that process. And I think too often as teachers, we think like, you know, we have to have that project to grade. And it's like, well, no, we can assess process. We can walk around as students are working and have a rubric. I used to use head, hands, and heart. So I could walk around and look at what you're doing and assess, are you using your head to think and organize and plan, come up with an idea? Are you using your hands in an effective way? It's the same thing. Like as kids are collaborating, you don't have to rely on the end product. You can have them, you can walk around and I'm witnessing it. What better way to evaluate than I have firsthand of experience of seeing this student do this thing. And I can assess that. I can evaluate that, and you know that's more powerful than looking at it in this end product and then trying to go back to kind of to assess that. And it just that idea of that process.
That makes me think of that whole just that idea of like art is something that you do. It's not something you get done.
Yeah,
and that the learning's in the doing.
Yeah, Eric, you're dropping some gems tonight. 1 + 1 is 3. We got heads, hands, heart. Let's keep it flowing, everybody.
I think we all are. I mean, I think just all this that you know, you got 5 heads are better than 1. I mean, this is a collaboration.
There's another one.
So this right here is the key. I mean, there's 5 of us, and then we're also collaborating with the people out there that are sitting there listening, asking us questions, putting in their thoughts. So it's like, you know, that, and just that energy, like all of a sudden I feel like very pumped up because of this collaborative energy. And so when we're talking about like, you know, now in this COVID world, can that collaboration, maybe we can't physically share materials because, you know, we have to sanitize and all that, or everyone's behind plexiglass. But as Michael Dotson was saying, that idea of the energy in the room. And so like, even now, like, could you have students in breakout rooms sharing and collaborating and talking and negotiating a space or drawing or a story? Or I mean, I can just imagine like small groups of like 4 or 5 kids getting together and it's like, okay, you're all going to collaborate and you're all going to make something on your own. But you know, like I just there's some energy there that I think is kind of interesting. So
I shared a rubric that I borrowed from Kit Grauer, and I put in some of the criterion on both the Zoom chat and the Pathful chat. And I talked to, you know, like Michael, I taught middle school for the majority of my career, but I also use it with my in my current practice teaching future teachers how to think about their visual journals. But when I taught middle school, I would talk to kids about, you know, what is research, what I'm looking for when I say research. Because oftentimes, you know, you hear kids talk about research and they're like, I went down a YouTube rabbit hole. And I'm like, okay, you know, talk to me about how that was research. Tell me what you think about that. Because often in academia, there's an idea of research and then there's an idea of like what's common talk for research. So, you know, where is the knowledge? Who are your citations? And talking to kids about finding good resources and critical thinking. That was another thing about like, who are you citing in your research? Who are the people you're using as sources? And the value in that, whether that is an artistic mentor that they're following, or that's somebody that they're reading, you know, or, you know, kids often, especially today, are like, well, I was on Snapchat and, you know, I saw this person I follow on Snapchat. They were talking about yada, 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 and saying like, well, how do you know they're a reliable resource? What are they, you know, what makes what they're saying credible? And what are they using as their backup for their statements? And in the same way that a writer would, you know, and thinking about that, you know, when you're asking someone to speak to an artist, you're like, okay, where are like some examples of the work that they've done that speaks to these ideas, or in their artist statements, or, you know, so that they have some examples of that. And so that there's some critical inquiry that you're asking students to do, and that it's being taught inside your classes that speaks to these ideas of like, who is an artist, what is the work they're doing, you know, what are the examples, and that you're asking them to think about what it is that they're doing, where they go with this, or as kids come to collaborate, where are they drawing from examples, and that they're guiding each other through this critical thinking process.
And Sam, it's like Eric was saying at his last session too. It's allowing that choice too, and where you're not creating a project around a certain artist either. You're looking at those kids, and you're the guide on the side saying, hey, you work a little like this artist. Have you ever seen this artist before? And then you're introducing that, and that's another way to approach those. Even art history, and bringing it into the equation, so that you're pairing an artist up, a student artist, with someone who works like them already, and you're creating a collaboration there. So we've got about another minute, everybody, and then they're going to kick us out of the room. But I hope you guys join us Saturday at 4:00, where we're going to continue this, but not in the collaboration art realm, but in the root of this, backwards mapping into the visual journal, and where those stories are born.
And I just say, check us out online. Some of us are on social media, some of us aren't, but we have websites and things out there. Just kind of check us out. And if you've got questions, I know I'm going to go back in later to the comments in the chat on Pathable and try to answer some things and respond. So anyway, just thank you all for joining in.
Yep, I appreciate everybody being here tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.
So great to see everybody. Thank you.
Why do we always feel like we have to wave when we're done with Zooms?
Because it's fun.
Great to see you, Glenda.
Hey, Michael Dodson.
Yes.
On your one thing, you talked about model process, and then it was explore something, and then he switched the slide, and I didn't see the rest.
Well, you have access to the slides, Steve.
Did he put all of those in the in that document?
Yeah, he put all of them in there. Yeah,
Okay.
it's
I'll look at it.
yeah, it's explore and practice the media, generate creative ideas, and develop an artistic identity.
Let me look. Yep. Okay, I got it.
Hey, they didn't kick us out.
I know.
If anyone's interested, the Draw and Play Here project is www.drawandplayhere.com, and we will give you a sketchbook if you request one. Either if you have a planned collaborator, or you just want to get involved with somebody else, you want us to randomly set you up. If you go to our website, I put the link in the chat a couple times, and it'll be recorded onto the Pathable as well. But www.drawandplayhere.com, and then you go to contact and reach out to us and let us know, and we'll send you a sketchbook.
I'm going to stop the recording if that's all right with you guys.
Yeah. All right. So I will